I'm the founder of Faith and Prejudice, and I'm so grateful that you decided to take some time to join us for what I believe is going to be a very consequential broadcast. You know, it's been said that we have been living through a triple pandemic: racial unrest, economic uncertainty, and of course, COVID-19. Now, the effect, the impact of this has certainly been visible, but there's also been some invisible impact to people's mental and emotional well-being. Now, when it comes to racial injustice, Mental Health America defines racial trauma as the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters of racial bias, discrimination, hate crimes, etc. If you know anything about the Black community, there is an institution in the Black community that has been a safe space to have conversations that allow people who have experienced racial trauma to vent, to find a place of bonding, a place of healing, and that is the barbershop. We're so excited tonight to talk to Lorenzo Lewis, who is the founder of the Confess Project, which we believe is providing an innovative solution to addressing issues of racial trauma outside of the four walls of a church by going to where the people are, in the barbershop. Lorenzo is a social entrepreneur, a professional speaker, and he has an incredible story of resilience. He will be interviewed tonight by Faith and Prejudice Program Director Imani Missouri, and I hope you will stay tuned and share this broadcast with friends and family because it's going to be transformative. Thank you for joining us.
For those that are tuning in, we have the pleasure of having Lorenzo Lewis with us, who is the founder of the Confess Project. And for this month, we're going to be focusing on healing from racialized trauma. So before we go into like the deep stuff of racialized trauma, Lorenzo, just tell us a little bit more about you and what brings you to the work.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here. What brings me to this work is a diagnosis of major depression. Early on in my 20s and working in the mental health field for about a decade, I realized personally and professionally that I had a place and a voice. Coming from a family line of people that suffer from trauma and abuse and incarceration, I realized that what better way to advocate from someone who's been in recovery, and also in addition to wanting to support the community, our Black community, in some of the similar problems that I have faced as well.
Thank you. Yes. And one of the reasons why we wanted to engage in this conversation with you and with the movement that you have going on with the Confess Project is because, this aspect of health is not always as visible, right? And there's been a very unique way in which you are approaching the work with your team at the Confess Project through leveraging partnerships with the barbershops. And, for those of us who, have been entrenched in Black and brown communities, the barbershop, similar to like a hair salon, is a space of reprieve, relationship building, and also dialogue. So, in some ways, it's kind of like a sanctuary of sorts for people. Why did you choose to focus on this particular meeting spot as the focal point of the organization?
Well, absolutely. I grew up in my aunt's beauty salon as a kid. From the ages 4 to 5, I went to the beauty shop every day, and I never forget. Being a small young man there, sitting there in that booster seat with my feet dangling from the chair. It was my barber, and was one of the few barbers there in the salon at the time. Was truthfully my first mentor, and so he really embraced me and gave me support and really allowed me to feel seen, heard, and loved. And so that relationship, watching how stylists were engaged with the community, from feeding community to helping people that was going through a hard time, this was really what I recognize as village care and what our communities ultimately are doing across the country, and some that can be doing more of this village work in our barbershops and salons in America.
Mm, I love that. Village work, village work. And as like, I'll be remiss if I do not name like the elephant in the room, right? Like, in addressing systemic racism, we are in a recovery mode of what a lot of people have called a triple pandemic, right? Where racism, COVID-19, and also the economy. Um, in your work, like how is it that the organization and then the partnerships with the barbershops, how did you adjust to kind of and navigate, just like the change with the triple pandemic? And what were you hearing from the barbers and from the community in terms of how they were impacted by it?
Yeah, well, a lot of what we heard was from barbers that they were really, tired. Community was really tired, and they were really exhausted. And I think in a lot of ways, understanding that racism is nothing new to a lot of these men and their families, that they've already been impacted. I've been impacted by racism, early as 8 years old as a kid. And so I know what it looks like. And so I think a lot of it for us has helped to really shape unity and better, stronger community building, having more deeper conversations about, healthy masculinity, but also, macho-ness, but also how to regulate our emotions during this time. And so I think a lot of this is understanding our boundaries and self-control, because we're angry, right? We feel counted out. In a lot of ways, this has been a slap in the face. By watching what media has exhibited to us, and how our black people are really at really put in a bad predicament. And so I think a lot of this has been a processing and or teaching of healthy masculinity and healthy ways of surviving and resilience.
Yes. Wow. Yes. And you said emotional regulation, which is, it's key. And also to have a space where you can release that in a healthy way. How did you, so like by the end of this year, about a little over, like thousands of people, thousands, I believe like close to 1 million people, right, would have been impacted and touched by the Confess Project. How did you go about building the relationships with the barbers, and then also to have your footprint in 20 plus cities?
Yeah, absolutely. We have now, 35 cities with over 600 barbers, and our work is really in the cornerstone of building relationships and peer-to-peer support. This is
Mm,
an early stage intervention that really involves coalition building and strengthening through organizing, also through connectivity. And so our work is really at the epicenter of, who knows who, like in better
mm,
sense of words, which barbers are really connected, really being involved in the industry of grooming. So whether that's through hair shows and barbering events, being connected to barber clubs and associations. So we have really utilized that to our strength, but also with our partnerships with Gillette and our partnership with Andy's company, which is one of the top grooming and clipper brands for men. And so we have now been able to leverage these opportunities to really reach a massive amount of barbers across the United States in this moment.
mm. Wow. Yes. Coalition building and the relationships are key. And that's something that we were drawn to, right? Because it's like the phrasing of and how you have positioned the work, you see it as a movement. You see it as something that is on a continuum and that really has the ambassadors, the people that are working to affect this change in communities across the country. Um, so just kind of like dialing it back just a little bit, like just in terms of racialized trauma, which may be a new term for some of our viewers that are tuning in right now or even later. Mental Health America says that it refers to the mental and emotional injury caused by encounters with racial bias and ethnic discrimination, racism, and hate crimes. They also say that any individual that has experienced an emotionally painful, sudden, and uncontrollable racist encounter is at risk of suffering race-based traumatic stress injury. And that's usually in the United States, Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC, also the acronym, which are the most vulnerable to experiences with white supremacy. How do you see the Confess Project being a catalyst in addressing systemic racism?
I see it's been a catalyst because we truly are really addressing the real issue by head on communicating this with the public, Also, I believe that our leadership is very much acclimated to having these hard discussions, whether it is with funders, policymakers, with community organizations. We truly believe that the barbers also that we work with are part of our team. And so that we are addressing this also by, virtually just building capacity and building knowledge, but also building strength amongst each other. We know that strength is in numbers and in power, and so the way that we're convening barbers on the ground is very much a voice to making change in communities, making change, whether that's through policy, making change, whether that's through rights and equity. And so we understand that we may be addressing one part of this, but also we are building a movement of people that is a voice that has marginally been affected. And so we realize that long term, this can be a real way to really change our communities in a very, very huge way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then in terms of like the change, right? Like, could you share just kind of like an anecdote or some examples of some of the healing that you have even witnessed take place as a result of this movement?
Absolutely. So we've, had a barber, perfect example in Tennessee that had a client sit in his chair. Client made a clear indication that I want to kill myself. I don't want to live any longer. And this was an opportunity where this barber had been through the training. He felt equipped. He felt that he could really support this person, and he was. This story was also really talked about in Oprah magazine in 2020 as we was recognized as an Oprah Health Hero. But on the other side of this, we've seen barbers in Philadelphia, same situation, had a client that was want to take their life by suicide. He hadn't been trained. He was worried sick. The client went missing for a while. Gratefully, the client did not hurt himself, but he wasn't equipped to deal with the situation. And so we don't want more barbers to be in that situation where they're not equipped, where they're not having the tools, where they cannot connect to resources that are available. And so that's a great way of seeing both sides of the coin. But 90% of the barbers that we engage stated that they rather receive therapy, this support in a barbershop rather than going to the brick and mortar. I think we realized that the mental health industry were created by white men and white women that don't represent Black people. And so what we recognize is that we have to build a coalition of healers and peer support folks on the ground that look like us, that can offer this support, that can help change the lives of individuals in their communities and in their families.
Yes, I so appreciate you speaking to the disparity, in the field. Also, you centering it on healing, right? Not so much like prescribing some diagnosis or label, but centering on that healing, and also having that be a space for folks to connect. Now, how did barbers kind of adjust even to, or how are they adjusting to certain places that are not necessarily as open? And like just being back in business, like how were they going about kind of like still being advocates and being of support to clients in lieu of that?
Yeah, what I've seen, not speaking for everybody, what I've seen on a very low level is that I guess in a media level with some of the barbers is that they are taking steps towards just really self-care and taking care of themselves. They're a lot more self-aware. The few barbers that we really have as on as our ambassadors, they're now facilitating the trainings with other barbers. They're facilitating the trainings at barber shows and at barber events and at barber schools. And so we recognize that is a opportunity of action because these guys was not doing this prior before, which means that we know that this is taking a change and effect in how they live their life. And so other Black men seeing other Black men engaging in this space, it really will do change just with and on the optics. And so we're excited that we have now engaged a leadership of people that should have been walking with the torch a long time ago. And now they are. And so I think they're going to inspire so many others. And that was our whole goal, was to create a lasting effect of a movement that will just translate into other people so that they can reach other people.
Mm-hmm. And, with this movement translating into other people, right? And connecting kind of to being like this sanctuary of sorts in key communities across this country. How do you see kind of like the work that you're doing? What is it that the faith community, what are some lessons that the faith community can take and kind of consider from your approach with the Confess Project, whether it's like traditional Black churches, white churches, multi-ethnic churches? What are some things that we could learn to build those bridges between and amongst community members?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have data that shows with a public health school here in Arkansas that, graduate students were able to realize that a lot of the times that barbers are not necessarily looking for therapists to come in their communities, into their shops, and to do this healing work, that sometimes it can be a pastoral leader or a community advocate. And so that let us know that the faith base does have a way into this work, because they do play such a huge role in ministry. And so I believe that the faith based community really can be a lot engaged, because what we're doing is taking everyday people that have such a huge impact on others and allowing them to have tools in a toolbox. And so this toolbox could also be an opportunity to continue to move forward, even into the hands of others that work in different sectors.
Mm, mm. And for those that may feel some hesitation, either because of fear, they don't necessarily feel as equipped, even as you were talking about like some of the barbers, like what would you say to those to kind of like get them over that hump or that perceived barrier of doing this work and engaging in it intentionally?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing is that, one way that we can really do this is by, taking our time and doing the research. That, there's on our website, we offer, ways of how to engage also through our social medias. But I think the key thing is to language is really important. Understanding that empathy and compassion should always be at the forefront. And what you don't know, and to find someone that knows. To not operate in a space where you're in the unknown, because this is critical work where it could, really, really hurt somebody if you're not careful, or someone can hurt themselves. And so I think it's critical to know that we should think about the industry of folks as a melting pot. Everybody is doing some parts of helping and healing one another, and playing our role, and again, bringing in experts, bringing in organizations, removing, any egos, and really focusing on humility, and allowing this to allow us to help other folks. And I think that's what we do. We train barbers. We're not trying to diagnose clients. We're not trying to be therapists. That is not our role. We have therapists that play that role. And so I think we do what we do really well, and that's it. And so we've been focused on doing that work, and building partnerships with other people that do other parts of the work, because I know that those things are important as well.
So I know that you also like are involved in not just the space of equipping the barbers, right? But there's also this employability component that's connected to the work. And you also have a book that is going to be released,
Yeah.
Jumping Over Life's Hurdles. And it is with the Black boy in mind. Why was this so important for you to write, and to write now, like in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited that, I took my life story as a 17-year-old kid that was a step away from being convicted as a felon and sent to prison, for a firearm. And so, during my short period there in juvenile detention, I was depressed. I didn't want to live any longer. I felt that I had been, left out, because a lot of this was because, I was born in a prison. My mother was incarcerated when I was born, and so I recognized that in addition to that, that I felt hopeless, and I felt that this was where I needed to be at, and it wasn't. And so Jumping over life hurdles and staying in the race is an opportunity to help young Black men between the ages of 13 and 17 to process their emotions, to understand, that trauma is something that happens to us, but it's something that doesn't have to live within us, that healing is possible. And this comes along with a workbook as well that helps them to process these emotions. Yeah, so Jumping Over Life Hurdles and Staying in the Race is a memoir that outlines my life of depression and incarceration. The book is really entailed for young Black men between the ages of 13 and 17, what allows them to process their feelings, their emotions, and the trauma that they may have underwent from poverty and parenting and a lot of the other societal issues that affect young Black men. It comes with a curriculum where it allows them to do this work with a mentor in mind or a caregiver. And so this can be found at LorenzoPLewis.com for organizations and people that are working with young Black men, but seeing it through the eyes of a young Black man who's been incarcerated, that's also been counted out, but also that was able to overcome those systemic issues that were faced. So.
Thank you. And it's available right now, correct?
Yes, it is available at LorenzoPLewis.com. Also at the ConfessProject.com, you can also find a way to purchase it through there, as the organization is helping to support this as it falls in line within the scope of young men that we're reaching in our work through barbershops as well.
Thank you so much. I mean, I appreciate your time, and also just like the team. For those that are tuning in and are curious about how to be more intentional about partnering with the work that you're doing with the Confess Project, how could they go about doing that?
Well, they can feel free to reach out at theconfessproject.com and on the contact form of our website, drop us a note. Someone will be in touch in regards of how to support and or to reach out about partnerships or any way of how we can support through trainings or any support regarding community organizing with barbershops in cities across America. We're open to doing that virtually and in person if the fitting is there and alignment is together. Yes.
Wonderful. So for those that are tuning in, if you see that there's opportunity for the Confess Project and the model to exist in your local neighborhood, your area, definitely reach out to Lorenzo and team. So again, thank you so much, Lorenzo, for the work that you're doing, for the work that the team is doing to shed light on this aspect of health. And I really hope that it inspires us, the faith community and the community at large to be more intentional about how we are healing with each other.
Yes, absolutely. No, thank you all again. This has been a great opportunity. Really always excited to share our stories, share our truth, and most of all to see that people can be stigma-free and break through.
Thank you. Stigma-free and breakthrough. Thank you.